Hello. I'd like to start by congratulating Barbara Kingsolver for being the winner of this year's Women's Prize for Fiction with her fantastic book, Demon Copperhead. Well done to Barbara Kingsolver. It's an absolutely fantastic novel. If you haven't had the joy of reading it yet, get your hands on a copy immediately. It is an absolutely brilliant, devastating, tragic, and in a way, musical read. It wasn't on my list of books to discuss this evening in terms of musical books, but it does have an amazing cadence in the way that it's written, and the language of our hero, Demon himself, is just incredibly musical and brilliantly described and brilliantly read on Audible if you were to listen to it on Audible. So that is an aside. Well done to Barbara Kingsolver. And welcome to you all this evening. We're going to be talking about music in literature. And I'm going to be asking you all the questions. Can literature conjure up music? I think it can. If you were to take a book with you to a desert island, knowing that you had no music as an option, what would that book be? Do send me a message and let me know. Very curious about your answers. And do you have any favourite fictional musicians in literature or favourite books that describe music in any way? I'd love to know your thoughts. And I know there's a lot of amazing musical books out there. I'm going to touch on what I can this evening. I am going to start off with a bit of a classic, Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus, which is quite a hefty tome of a read, not quite as much as a tome as The Magic Mountain, but it is an amazing and quite mesmerizing read, which is a reshaping of the Faust legend. It's all about um, a man who is a composer who decides to sell his soul to the devil in order to become a musical genius. And he does succeed in that aim. It's a reshaping of the Faust legend set in the context of the first half of the 20th century. So it's set during the turmoil of Germany in that period, and it centres on the life of fictional composer Adrian Leverkühn, who has an extraordinary intellect and creativity as a young man, which mark him as being destined for success. But his ambition is to achieve absolute genius and greatness beyond perhaps what humanity is capable of. And he strikes a Faustian bargain for creative genius. He has these kind of intense, vivid dreams in which he talks to a devil. And we never know if that devil is a real devil or not. But because Thomas Mann is such an amazing writer who is capable of messing with our heads and conjuring realms which we wouldn't normally go to, just showing off my makeup here just in case you thought I had weird squiggles on my face. They are actually musical squiggles. Um, so he deliberately contracts syphilis in order to become mad enough to write amazing, unforgettable, brilliant music. This syphilis deepens his artistic inspiration through madness. So Thomas Mann is arguing perhaps that in order to be a true artistic genius, you have to be a little bit or a lot mad? That is an interesting question in itself. Do you agree? I think I probably do. He is subsequently visited by a Mephistolian being who says, this is paraphrasing, you can only see me because you're mad, but that doesn't mean that I don't really exist. So he could be a total fiction of Adrian's imagination, or perhaps he is indeed Mephistopheles. So Adrian, our hero, renounces love and bargains his soul in exchange for 24 years of genius, which is what he gets. His demonic inspiration leads him to unparalleled and extraordinary musical creativity, which parallels the actual innovations of Arnold Schoenberg, the real musician. So Thomas Mann was, in a way, writing a kind of life of Schoenberg, but fictionalizing it and obviously talking about madness in a way which doesn't relate to the real man. Leverkusen's last creative years are increasingly haunted by his obsession with the apocalypse and the last judgment. He knows that he's going to go mad and he feels the inexorable progress of his madness. And this inevitably sends him even more mad towards total breakdown. And as in many of the actual Faustian legends, he calls together his closest friends to witness his final collapse. It's all quite depressing, I have to admit. It's not the most uplifting read, but it is a really beautifully descriptive, uh, deep dive into what makes somebody a musical genius and whether you have to actually be mad and renounce most ordinary human interactions in order to create great works of art. Um, Discuss. I'd love to know your thoughts. So it is a really brilliant book in many ways, not just because it's about music and about the disintegration into madness, but also because of its setting in the context of the German cultural and political environment, which led to the rise and fall of Nazi Germany. So I'm going to read you just a little passage from it so you get a sense of the writing of Thomas Mann. It obviously this is in translation. Sorry, oh German readers out there who would prefer to read it in the original. It was an extraordinarily difficult, sorry, it was extraordinarily difficult to listen to his shouts and to the highly complicated music both at once. We all tried. We strained, leaning forward, hands between knees, looking by turn at his hands and his mouth. The characteristic of the movement, of course, is the wide gap between the bass and treble, between the right and the left hand, and a moment comes, an utterly extreme situation, when the poor little motif seems to hover alone and forsaken above a giddy, yawning abyss, a procedure of awe-inspiring unearthliness, to which there succeeds a distressful making of itself small, a start of fear, as it were, that such a thing could happen. Much else happens before the end. But when it ends, and while it ends, something comes after so much rage, persistence, obstinacy, extravagance, something entirely unexpected and touching to the mildness and goodness. With the motif passed through many vicissitudes, which takes leave and so doing becomes itself entirely leave taking, a parting wave and call. With this DGG occurs a slight change. Sorry, it experiences a small melodic expansion. After an introductory C, it puts a C sharp before the D so that it no longer scans heaven's blue, meadowland, but O thou heaven's blue, greenest meadowland, fare thee well for A. And this added C sharp is the most moving, sorry, conciliatory, pathetically reconciling thing in the world. It is like having one's hair or cheek stroked lovingly, understandingly, like a deep and silent farewell look. It blesses the object, the frightfully harried formulation with overpowering harmony. Finding it quite difficult to read. This is Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus, And this is a really beautiful passage, which I do think succeeds in describing music incredibly beautifully. That bit where it talks about the poor little motif hovering in the air, waiting for resolution, is a really lovely moment. And I do think that Thomas Mann is amazing at describing music. Even if you don't know the piece that he's talking about, it still is in your mind as an amazing piece of music. It blesses the object, the frightfully harried formulation with overpowering humanity, lies in parting so gently on the hearer's heart in eternal farewell that the eyes run over. Never forget the pain, it says. Great was God in us. 'Twas all but a dream. Friendly be to me. Then it breaks off. Quick, hard, triplets hasten to a conclusion with which any other piece might have ended. So that is a little bit from Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus, which has a lot of amazing descriptions of music in it. And I think it's one of the best books describing music itself and also describing the way that music makes you feel and the way that it transcends ordinary moments of life. I wonder if any of you have read it. If you have, did you love it? Did you find it difficult? Or did you find it mind blowing? I'm getting some comments here on Facebook. Bharat says, I'm thinking of Vikram Seth's An Equal Music. Fantastic, which is one that I am going to talk about. And also Nick Hornby's Juliet Naked, which I haven't read. Thank you for that recommendation. I look forward to reading that. Hi, Colleen, great to see you. And Bharat is also saying Herr Klezmer in Daniel Deronda. Those are great suggestions. Thank you so much. And do feel free to give me suggestions, anyone that's joining at the moment. Is my Instagram being a little bit weird? Oh, it's suddenly gone dark. That is highly peculiar. Sorry about that. Let me just get back onto Instagram. Something strange has happened there. Why is it going so dark? Sorry, oh, Instagram listeners. Here we go. Back to live. Can you see me, Instagram people? I think I'm going to stop the video and start again. Oh, there we go. It suddenly is going black. Something very peculiar going on. Instagram people, give me a little wave and tell me that you can see me. I think you probably should be able to. Sorry about uh, muffling around a lot. Tell me if you can hear me as well. I think Facebook is absolutely fine, but Instagram's being a bit weird. So if anyone can send me a comment, then I would love that. I can see there's lots of people there. Just let me know that everything's working okay. So to continue, going from the sublime to the terrifying, I am going to now talk about American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, which some would say is anti-music. This is a book which I have mentioned to you before as one that me and my husband talked about for a whole of our first date because we had such wildly differing opinions about it. And it's a book which juxtaposes extreme violence with incredibly boring passages about music. Patrick Bateman is the anti hero who has this habit of talking about music in pitiless detail and in a rather off putting fashion. But I think it's really interesting to mention in a talk about music because he manages to kind of kill off music for us in the same way, perhaps, that he's killing off women. I'm going to read you a passage which is a kind of conglomeration of some of the parts of the book, which is then made into the dialogue for the film. So this is Patrick Bateman saying, "Do you like Phil Collins? I've been a big Genesis fan ever since the release of their 1980 album, Duke. Before that, I really didn't understand any of their work. Too artsy, too intellectual. It was on Duke where Phil Collins' presence became more apparent. I think Invisible Touch was the group's undisputed masterpiece. It's an epic meditation on intangibility. At the same time, it deepens and enriches the meaning of the preceding three albums. Christy, take off your robe. Listen to the brilliant ensemble playing of Banks, Collins, and Rutherford. You can practically hear every nuance of every instrument. Sabrina, remove your dress. In terms of lyrical craftsmanship, the sheer songwriting, this album hits a new peak of professionalism. Sabrina, why don't you dance a little? Take the lyrics to Land of Confusion. In this song, Phil Collins addresses the problems of abusive political authority. In Too Deep is the most moving pop song of the 1980s about monogamy and commitment. The song is extremely uplifting. Their lyrics are positive and affirmative as anything I've heard in rock. Christy, get down on your knees so Sabrina can see your asshole. Phil Collins' solo career seems to be more commercial and therefore more satisfying in a narrower way, especially songs like In the Air Tonight and Against All Odds. Sabrina, don't just stare at it, eat it. But I also think Phil Collins works best within the confines of the group than as a solo artist, and I stress the word artist. This is Sussudio, a great, great song, a personal favourite. Uh, there we go. So it does go on, but I'm going to stop. It's quite, he is quite boring, to be honest, when he's talking about music in American Psycho. But it's that juxtaposition between the horrible, awful things that Patrick Bateman is doing to women with the way he talks about music that somehow makes the book so powerful. And it's all about um, brutal and horrible violence. I'm just closing my door so that I don't have any interruptions. Sorry about that. So, moving on to Vikram Seth and Equal Music. Thanks to Bharat for bringing up that suggestion. It's a powerful love story from the author of the international bestseller, A Suitable Boy. And I bet there's quite a few of you out there who've read both of these. There's a chance sighting on a bus, a letter which should never have been read, a pianist with a secret that touches the heart of her music. And Equal Music is a book about love, the love of a woman lost and found again. It's also a book about music and how the love of music can run like a passionate fugue through a life. It's the story of Michael, Julia, and the love that binds them. And it is a really powerful, amazing, and brilliant read. One of those novels that you can read and reread, but the first time you read it, it is an emotional cliffhanger. So if you haven't had the pleasure of reading it yet, definitely put that high on your list of musical books. So, in a nutshell, the story is about a music student in Vienna, violinist Michael Home, who falls in love with pianist Julia McNichol. They play together in a string trio. What could be more sexy than that, other than a duet? But when Michael has a nervous breakdown because of tensions with his stern and demanding violin teacher, he abruptly leaves Vienna and Julia without warning. So I'm not going to give away too much, but there's a 10-year gap in the story, which actually does seem to be a bit of a theme with some of the books I've got tonight. And then they try to reconvene, but so much has gone on in the gap. There's been a marriage, there's been a child, there's been an autoimmune disease creeping along. And frankly, true love is not going to run smoothly in this story, but it's an amazing read and you'll be on the edge of the seat. So that's An Equal Music by Vikram Seth. Um, So, whoops, now I'm doing strange things with Facebook. Here we are. I'm jumping around with my recommendations tonight because I feel it's nice to have a smorgasbord of different types of musical books. So I am now going to move on to Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which many of you might be watching as we speak on Netflix. It's a really excellent TV adaptation of the book. The book, of course, has so much more going on, and I hugely enjoyed both reading it and listening to it because it's a book that tells the story in several different voices, and the audio narration has several different actors telling the story. And it is a book, as you can guess from the title, about Daisy Jones, who is a singer, and her band, who are the Six. Well, they're not her band to start with, they start off as a separate band and then they come together. It's a really fun, rip roaring read, which has a lot of massive dramas, huge ups and downs, and it's all about a pop star life. And I think if you're looking for a good summer read, definitely try that. It's hugely enjoyable. It does have some really tragic moments. It has quite a few surprises. It's by no means an easy ride, but I think, like all Taylor Jenkins Reid novels, it's very well crafted. It really gets you into that hip lifestyle where people are throwing around money, taking drugs, being addicted to substances, having to try and get over their addictions, leading a very rock and roll lifestyle, which I have to say Taylor Jenkins Reid writes about really well, and I would definitely say it's a great one. And what's brilliant about it in terms of music is that it really gets that chemistry of people creating music together, which you do see in the Netflix series, but I feel like it's much better evoked and described in the novel, partly because in the novel you don't hear the music. And I must say that's one bit of a letdown with the TV adaptation. I don't think the music's that brilliant, and you really want the music to be amazing because they are a world-beating band who sell gazillions of copies of their records at the time, and you just don't entirely believe it from the TV version. But of course, when you're reading about it, you can completely believe in that amazing music. Um, so next one to mention on my list of fantastic musical books, going from pop back to classical music, Bel Canto by Anne Patchett is a really fantastic read. It's one that I have mentioned quite often in the past, but this is an amazing story about the power of music to transcend different cultures. So it is about an opera singer who has been invited to the house of an ambassador in order to sing at his birthday party, and she turns up to do that. But shortly after arriving, uh, a whole load of terrifying kidnappers arrive, or people who, yeah, they are kidnappers, terrorists who arrive demanding ransom for hostages. And the story is then about the hostages being stuck in this one room, which is the enormous room of the ambassador's house, and they're awaiting rescue or awaiting death. So that sounds like it would be a really horribly depressing idea for a novel, but it's actually an incredibly uplifting book, which I would hugely urge you to read. It's one that I often give people who are thinking about love, the power of love, about whether they have found the one, because this is a book strangely about the intensity and power and passion of love. And it does really make you think about your own loving relationships. It's also about how music can overpower difficulties and how it can cut through language, of course. And it's very beautifully written. It's quite a good length as well. And it has really devastating moments. That's Bel Canto by Anne Patchett. Another book that is a fantastic novel to read about music, I'm just looking for, is Patrick Gale's Take Nothing With You. Here it is. So this is a really lovely, kind of sad book, I would say, about a boy who is actually a man at the beginning of the book, who is or was a cellist. And the book starts with the grown up man going into hospital because he's got a small cancer that's going to be removed. And he goes into this room and he has to take nothing with him because he's he's got to go into this kind of cleansed area where you're not allowed to have anything extraneous. But one thing he is allowed to take with him is music, and he actually does have music on his headphones. And I think he has to leave it behind after the end of his um, session, which I think is chemotherapy. So he's actually given an iPod with music on it that he listens to while he's going through the procedure. And while he's in there, he reflects on his life. And being Patrick Gale, it's very beautifully crafted, wonderfully observed, very poignant, and all about how a boy begins his life believing that he will be an amazing cellist, and it's you totally live his entire childhood with him because it's so brilliantly evoked. You go through his discovering of the cello, realizing that he might be really good at it, his parents urging him to really take it up and take it seriously, buying him a cello, and then his gradual discovery of a bohemian world through the people that he meets through the cello. He then goes to this incredibly intense academy where he can learn to be a brilliant cellist, and he meets very charismatic teachers, and we go through his entire adolescence as he realizes that he's gay, has his first kiss, and then comes the devastating realization that he actually isn't quite good enough to make the grade and be a professional musician. And I just love the whole story because so many of us have been there. I was never um, at all that musical, but I have lots of friends who were incredibly musical, and I saw some of them go through that pain of thinking they might be brilliant geniuses and be able to be professional musicians, but then slowly realizing that actually they weren't that amazing and they could perhaps be a music teacher or have a completely different profession. And that's what happens to our hero in this book. And you know it from the start, so I'm not actually giving things away too drastically. You just don't know why. So Take Nothing With You is a really poignant book, which I think many of us who are not professional musicians but have played an instrument can relate to, even if you played it in the most amateur fashion like me. You can still relate to that desire for reaching greater heights and believing that it could actually happen for you. So, is it a book about disappointment? Good question. Patrick, are you out there? Let us know. But it's definitely a book about the power and beauty of music, and Patrick does really evoke that, and uh, you do get into the mindset that music is the only thing that matters. And I do think that is one of the books that conjures up the music in a way that you could take it to your desert island and feel like you were experiencing a whole concert. Another one that comes to mind when I was thinking about Take Nothing With You is A Terrible Kindness by Joe Browning Rowe, which is a fantastic novel, very, very sad. And it's another one in which a young boy has a moment of despair when he realizes that his musical career is effectively over. And it is utterly devastating. It really had me with a punch in the gut when that happened. And I would recommend it very much. That's A Terrible Kindness by Joe Browning Rowe, as a description of the power of music. It's about a boy who's a singer. He sings in various choirs, including, um, I think, King's College in Cambridge. And he actually gives up his career because he has this really devastating moment, which you can hardly bear to think about. But it's half a book about music, but it's also a book about um, the terrible events that happened when uh, there was a landslide in Wales and an entire village practically was covered in mud, and a whole school full of children was covered in mud. Hell's Bells is saying it's a wonderful book, isn't it? It's so good, and I absolutely loved it and thoroughly recommend it. And even though it sounds really depressing, it is one of those ones that has a lot to say about grief in a way that's very cathartic. So anyone that has experienced a loss, I think, would relate to the book because it is very much about loss of all kinds: loss of your parents, loss of loved ones, loss of people that you don't even know but you feel really deeply in your heart. So that's A Terrible Kindness by Joe Browning Rowe. And I think it has some of the best descriptions of music that I've recently read as well. Or if not the actual music coming into your head, the power and importance of music is something that really gets into your soul through that book. So, by the way, that it was the Aberfan landslide in 1966, which brought that book into Joe Browning Rowe's imagination. She wanted to write about that terrible tragedy in which many children died. And that's the beginning of the book when our hero, William, who's only 19, decides to go and help um, to disinter and embalm the bodies of the people that were buried under that landslide. So it's a great read. Uh, Moving on to another love story, all set around music, As It Is in Heaven by Niall Williams, who's an Irish writer who is not read as much as he should be, I feel. Absolutely beautiful writer who writes fantastically about both art and music. As It Is in Heaven, one of my favourite books about music, and Four Letters of Love, one of my favourite books about painting. I think Niall Williams really gets the artistic spirit. And As It Is in Heaven is a book which, whenever I pick it up, I always remember a moment when me and my husband were in a doctor's waiting room. Uh, we can't remember what we were doing, something to do with babies, and we were in a very kind of desolate waiting room where there were people seeming to be having sad news, and we suddenly both looked at each other, realizing that one of us was reading As It Is in Heaven, and the other one was reading Being Dead by John Grace, and we suddenly caught each other's eyes and cracked up due to the fact that we were reading these books which were both about death, perhaps. But As It Is in Heaven is actually not a book about death. It is a book about love. It's about how love isn't easy, especially if you find the woman of your dreams and then lose her, which is what happens to Philip Griffin and his son Stephen, because Stephen is just a boy when his mother and sister are killed in a car crash, and his father never recovers from the accident. He wasn't involved, but is consumed by grief. His only desire is to be reunited with his wife, and that's the dad, Stephen. Before that happens, though, Philip is the dad, wants to ensure the happiness of his son, Stephen, who's now a grown man. And this is an amazing, quite complex book. Um, but once you dive in, you'll be hooked and won't be able to stop. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of it, which will show you the brilliance of the writing and the way that he writes about music, which is so evocative. She wore a green velvet dress. They played a Boccherini minuet. There was a light above her, and he watched where it glanced upon the angle of her neck. She pressed the held notes and squeezed them for tenderness, her lips closed, and her green eyes watching the invisible ghosts of feelings that she that she freed into the air. Her right foot appeared beneath the dress, and he watched it through the fullness of Brahms' Hungarian Dance Number 17. She played Kreisler, Elgar, Schubert, and Brahms. While she played, nothing else mattered in the world. When the concert had finished, Stephen stood and applauded loudly and was still standing there when the rest of the small audience had filed past, and Paul Sheila had closed the piano and walked away. Gabriella stepped down from the small stage. Thank you for coming, she said to him. She might have been about to walk past him, but she stopped, and Stephen moved a foot closer. He stooped down. She smelled like autumn below him. He wanted to eat her voice, and for a terrible, gaping moment, said nothing, waiting for her to speak again. A driplet ran downward on his crown, and he turned his head slantedly to the right. We appreciated your listening, she said. Appreciated. It was like an Italian word when she said it, and he tasted it like a delicacy. He wanted to listen to her talk, as he had listened to her play, but the fear of his pause growing overlong made him speak. You are. I think you are. She looked at him. She looked into his eyes and she touched his arm. You are very kind, she said. I think I saw you before. Yes, in Ennis, he said, and Galway. He wanted so to look at her face, but he did not. The Interpretini Veneziani! Oh, she stopped. You are the man who nearly died. She smiled when she said this, but even then, he thought, there was sadness in her. Her hair smelled like autumn rain, and he stooped down deeper within it. Only then you had more hair. Her face was lit with small laughter, and Stephen reached his hand in his bare crown, as if covering the revelation of some inner secret. You must love music, she said. I have not listened to music for 15 years, he wanted to say. I have been dead and woken up. I am shaking here in every particle of my spirit because of you. Please stay. Please stay here talking to me, he wanted to say. But the idiot in control of his body merely nodded at her, breathing parsley breath on the single word, yes. She stood there. She stood there in the green velvet dress, and he imagined he could sense the Adriatic and the sunlight in the skin of her shoulders. She was as different as Venice, and when she spoke again, giving him words like fruit in her rounded and softly bruised English, he had to try hard not to reach out and touch her. We play tomorrow, she said. There will be maybe more people. I don't care. The idiot was making his words too flurried. Pauseless gasps now. I mean, I don't. If nobody comes, I will be. You might prefer to play with more people, but I could pay more for. Not that it's money, you. But I. And there the words ran out, and he was tongue tied, and trussed with a glittering crown of sweat falling from his forehead. Which reminds me that I have a fan, and I'm also pretty hot. No, she touched his arm once more, as if she were a balm. It doesn't matter. I like to play, she said, and then moved a step from him, the strange, anguished man with the stiffly bent wire of his emotions piercing his insides. Bye bye. She was already walking towards the door with her violin when the idiot freed him, and Stephen could whisper after her, I will be here, closing his eyes and lifting his heart to repeat it louder. I will be here, and causing Gabriella Castoldi to stop at the doorway and look back at him one last time before she said bye bye again and was gone. That's As It Is in Heaven by Niall Williams. Fantastic book about music. Now, realizing time could run out, I'm just going to tell you about a couple of non-fiction books, one of which is um, Musicophilia by Oliver Sacks, which is, weirdly, a book that I've got 2 copies of. If anyone wants a spare copy, let me know. DM me and I'll send it to you because it is an absolutely brilliant book. Oh, Hell's Bells is saying, I'd recommend The Piano Shop on the Left Bank. Thank you for that. I have not read that, and I'm going to note that down because that sounds like a great read. The Forest of Wool and Steel, I also haven't read that, and French Rhapsody by Antoine Laurent, who I've only just recently discovered because he might even be here this evening. Antoine, let us know if you're out there. He has been coming to these Instagram live sessions. Hooray! And I therefore discovered his book, The Red Notebook, which I absolutely loved. So I would definitely read French Rhapsody by Antoine Laurent. Also, congratulations to Antoine, who's just won the Jules Verne Prize. I saw, which is fantastic. So thanks for that. I will get onto the case with those. They both look brilliant, and I've got another few recommendations from people. So, Musicophilia by Oliver Sacks is a really excellent read. It's fascinating. Sacks explains, "Oh, you're here, Antoine. Your praises are being sung. Great to see you." Hell's Bells has just been talking about French Rhapsody, which we're now all going to read. I'm very excited. Moving back to Musicophilia, Oliver Sacks. It's a description of the way music can pierce the heart directly. And this is the truth that he so brilliantly focuses upon, that music saves, consoles, and nourishes us. It was written in 2007, Musicophilia, Tales of Music and the Brain, in which he explores a range of psychological and physiological ailments and their intriguing connections to music. It's broken down into 4 parts, each with a distinctive theme. Part 1, titled Haunted by Music, which examines mysterious onsets of musicality and musicophilia. Part 2, A Range of Musicality, looks at musical oddities, musical synesthesia. Part 3 and 4 are all about memory and movement and music and emotions, identity and music. And there are many, many stories within those chapters. Just to get back to the excitement of Antoine and Helen meeting, I feel like suddenly we're actually in a salon, and I wish we actually were all in the same room. Wouldn't that be nice? Drinking some champagne, celebrating many awards, Antoine's Jules Verne Award, and also the Women's Prize won tonight by the fabulous Barbara Kingsolver. We should definitely raise a glass to her. Right now, I've only got water, but we should all be at the Savoy or similar salon. But let's pretend that we are, and maybe we can all have some bubbles at the end of this evening and celebrate music, literature, and art. So, Musicophilia by Oliver Sacks. It starts with an absolutely fantastic story about a man who's struck by lightning, and it's the fact that he's struck by lightning that makes him discover music. I'll read you a bit of the story, which does go on for a whole chapter, so I'll have to cut it down a bit. But it's a brilliant start to the book, and it makes you want to read all the other stories within the book. It's chapter one, A Bolt from the Blue, Sudden Musicophilia. Tony Cicoria was 42, very fit and robust, a former college football player who'd become a well regarded orthopedic surgeon in a small city in upstate New York. He was at a lakeside pavilion for a family gathering one fall afternoon. It was pleasant and breezy, but he noticed a few storm clouds in the distance. It looked like rain. He went to a payphone outside the pavilion to make a quick call to his mother. This was in 1994, before the age of cell phones. He still remembers every single second of what happened next. I was talking to my mother on the phone. There was a little bit of rain, thunder in the distance. My mother hung up. The phone was a foot away from where I was standing when I got stuck. I remember a flash of light coming out of the phone. It hit me in the face. Next thing I remember, I was flying backwards. Then he seemed to hesitate before telling me this. I was flying forwards, bewildered. I looked around. I saw my own body on the ground. I said to myself, "Oh shit, I'm dead." I saw people converging on the body. I saw a woman. She had been standing waiting to use the phone right behind me. Position herself over my body, give it CPR. I floated up the stairs. My consciousness came with me. I saw my kids, had the realization that they would be okay. Then I was surrounded by a bluish white light, an enormous feeling of well being and peace. The highest and lowest points of my life raced by me. No emotion associated with these. Pure thought, pure ecstasy. I had the perception of accelerating, being drawn up. There was speed and direction. Then, as I was saying to myself, this is the most glorious feeling I have ever had. Slam, I was back. Dr. Sikoria knew he was back in his own body because he had pain. Pain from the burns on his face and his left foot, where the electrical charge had entered and exited his body. And he realized only bodies have pain. He wanted to go back. He wanted to tell the woman to stop giving him CPR, to let him go. But it was too late. He was firmly back among the living. After a minute or two, when he could speak, he said, "It's okay. I'm a doctor." The woman, she turned out to be an intensive care unit nurse, replied, "A few minutes ago, you weren't." Come on, could there be a more dramatic beginning to a non-fiction book? It then goes on to explain how Dr. Sikoria became suddenly obsessed with music. So he'd never been at all musical. Uh, he has this sudden onset of craving piano music. He began to buy recordings and became especially enamored of a Vladimir Ashkenazy recording of Chopin favorites, the Military Polonaise, Winter Wind Etude, Black Key Etude, and so on. I loved them all, Sikoria said. I had the desire to play them. I ordered all the sheet music. At this point, one of our babysitters asked if she could store her piano in our house. So now, just when I craved one, a piano arrived. A nice little upright, which suited me fine. I could hardly read the music, could barely play, but I started to teach myself. In a nutshell, he went on to become an incredible pianist and composer, and he felt like he had been saved by, well, saved from near death in order to become a musician. So that's an amazing start. Then there's many other brilliant stories in this book by Oliver Sacks, all about music and the way that people are affected by music and the way that music um, plays strange tricks with your brain, and how some people have been cured of Alzheimer's by the use of music, and many other such instances. And it's a very typical Oliver Sacks kind of book where there's lots of different stories loosely threaded together. And as I said before, I do have 2 copies of this book. So if anyone would like one, send me a message and I will send it to you, spreading the love of literature. Another non-fiction, which is a great book about music, is How Music Works by David Byrne, which is a lovely flat tome with a kind of strangely squishy cover. I'm a big fan of David Byrne. I grew up on the Talking Heads. I've always loved his music. And he is, as well as being a brilliant musician, a really lovely writer who's quite philosophical. I also love his book about cycling through cities. Can't remember what it's called, but that's a really lovely read as well. And I'm just going to read you a tiny bit from it, but it's full of all sorts of amazing, lovely ideas about music. I'll just tell you what the chapter headings are, because that will give you an idea how music works. Um, we've got Creation in Reverse, My Life in Performance, Technology Shapes Music, Analog, Technology Shapes Music, Digital, In the Recording Studio, Collaborations, Business and Finances, How to Make a Scene, Amateurs, Harmonia Mundi, and Acknowledgements. So that is How Music Works by David Byrne. And I'll just read you a little bit because I just love the way he writes. It's in really nice kind of bite-sized chunks. It's an easy book to just pick up and read a random bit. It's a good loo book, as well as one that you might want to study and read in full. In the ancient Far East, it was also thought that sound played an essential role in the formation of the universe. In Tantric Buddhism, there is a sonoriferous ether called the Akasha, and from that ether flows the primordial vibrations. The Akasha is self-generative. It didn't come from something else, it made itself. But according to Tantric philosophy, this cosmic sound, which is sometimes referred to as Nada Brahman, actually comes from the vibrations that emanate when Shiva and Shakti have sex. It is referred to as the cosmic orgasm, and from it the entire material universe was formed. A little more than 100 years ago, Madame Blavatsky, who developed a mystical system called Theosophy that was for a while very popular, referred to this nada as the soundless sound, or the voice of silence, discreet, silent, true, esoteric, and momentous. The idea that vibrations permeate everything is indisputable. You don't have to be a tantric Buddhist or an acousmatic to accept it. The Venn diagram that contains spiritualist ideas, religious myths, and what we consider scientific facts do indeed overlap. Molecules vibrate at 100 times per second, atoms faster than that. These vibrations produce what could be considered sound, albeit sound that we cannot hear. The composer John Cage said, "Look at this ashtray. It's in a state of vibration. We're sure of that. And the physicist can prove it to us, but we can't hear those vibrations. It would be extremely interesting to place it in a little anechoic chamber and listen to it through a suitable sound system. Object would become process. We would discover the meaning of nature through the music of objects." That is a crazy thought. None of these divine or ancient scientific theories really explains the why part, why we gravitate to the specific harmonies we do, unless you accept God made it that way. End of discussion as an explanation. However, in our world of little faith, we ask for proof. And so he goes on. That also reminds me of another book, which is Ruth Ozaki's book. Um, Suddenly having a blank on the name, which is all about objects talking to each other. I'm going to have to remember what it is. Ruth Ozaki. She is such a good writer. The Book of Form and Emptiness, that's the one. And that is a really lovely book, in which there's a boy who's the hero of the story who can hear objects talking to each other, a bit like the way that David Byrne was just talking about objects vibrating and talking to each other and to us. Um, Being aware that time will run out. David Byrne, we love him, but I'm just going to mention a few books that other people have mentioned. Antoine, yes, John Cage is the guy who recorded the silence in the 60s. He's an amazing musician. and obviously a philosophical guy as well, who many musicians, definitely David Byrne, are completely obsessed with, because I think he was a kind of intellectual musician, very philosophical and very experimental. So, moving on to books mentioned by people who've come this evening and people that tweeted. We have The Magic Strings of Frankie Presto by Mitch Albom, the beloved author of Tuesdays with Morrie and the Five People You Meet in Heaven. This is a story, another love story between a man and woman, an artist and his mentor, between a musician and his God given talent. This is a recommendation from Damien. Thank you, Damien. This is a book narrated by the voice of music itself, music with a capital M. The story follows Frankie Presto, a war orphan born in a burning church, through his extraordinary journey around the world. Raised by a blind guitar teacher in Spain, gifted with a talent to change people's lives using six mysterious blue strings, Frankie navigates the musical landscape of the 20th century, from the 1950s jazz scene to the Grand Ole Opry to Elvis Mania and Woodstock, all the while searching for his childhood love. So that's The Magic Strings of Frankie Presto. I haven't read it. Great recommendation, though. Sounds like a lovely story. One that also came to mind that I forgot to mention is Our Endless Numbered Days by Claire Fuller, in which a girl is brought up in the woods in the middle of Germany by her father. I'm not going to give away what's going on, why she brought up in those woods, because you've got to read it to find out. And she is taught by her father to play the piano on a piece of wood that's been carved with all the notes of the piano, but no actual music is played. So she learns to play the piano with notes on a wooden plank that's been carved with all the notes that would be on a piano. And she learns music without being able to hear it, which is such a fantastically insane idea. And then later in the book, without giving away what happens, she does meet an actual piano and she can actually play it. And she was able to hear the notes that she was playing in her head because she's obviously something of a musical genius. So that's a really interesting book about music and silence and whether music can exist in your head without you ever having heard it before. I wonder if that is possible. And has anyone ever had any of those kinds of experiences where you might have a piece of music in your head that you've never heard before? Maybe if you are actually a musician and composer, that is how it works. My husband is actually an amazing writer of songs, and I'm going to have to ask him if that's how it works for him. Does he hear it fully completed in his head? I don't think he does. I think it slowly evolves as he writes it in his head. But maybe there are some people who have a fully formed piece of music which they then have to write down. So, Our Endless Numbered Days by Claire Fuller is an amazingly fascinating book, also about music, which takes it to a different level because it's talking about writing music, hearing music when it's purely played on a piece of wood without the notes actually being played. So, one more, which Daydreamer Diary, who comes to these sessions, mentioned, is Nove Conto by Alessandra Barrico, which I haven't read. Sorry, Nove Kento, as in New Century, which also looks like a fantastic novel, which I haven't read, which is about a baby on a ship who I think he's born on the ship and he spends his entire life living on that ship, kind of by accident. And he becomes a kind of musical genius. And he goes through many different realms of music, including lots of jazz. And he meets lots of amazing musicians while he's on the boat. That's Novecento, probably saying it badly. It's an Italian book by Italian novelist Alessandro Barrico. Novecento. So that sounds brilliant. And thank you very much to Daydreamer Diary for mentioning that. So I very much enjoyed thinking about music in literature, from Dr. Faustus by Thomas Mann to American Psycho by um, Bret Easton Ellis. I'm sure there's lots of amazing novels about music that I haven't mentioned. I hope I brought a few ones that you haven't heard about to your thoughts. Do share any with me that you would like the world to know about. And thanks so much for sharing your thoughts this evening. Thanks for coming, everyone. And next week, I'm going to do my session a bit earlier than normal, probably at 6 p.m. on my Instagram and Facebook, because it's the midsummer solstice, and we have a habit in our village of all walking up the hill and witnessing the sunset as a group, which is a lovely thing. So I'm going to be doing that in the evening from about 8. So I won't be able to do it at 9 o'clock. So if you'd like to join me, come at 6 next Wednesday to my Instagram. And also, don't forget, you can always book a bibliotherapy session direct with me by going to my website, and then I can give you advice all about what to read, what books you're going to love at this moment in your life, or you can buy bibliotherapy as a gift for a friend or loved one. So thanks so much for joining me. I will see you all very soon. And by the way, Damien has just got his new radio program, which is all about autofiction and what autobiographical fiction and memoir. So check that out because that's going to be absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to listen to that myself. So thanks for joining, everyone. See you soon. Good night.